Hi everyone, my name is Ariel, and we are going to be going over kind of a CLO quick start guide in today's video. Now, if you're curious, this is a re-recording of our CLO Live from October, and due to some of the quality not being the best, we decided it would be a good idea to just record this and put it on our YouTube as a regular tutorial as well, so you guys would have the best quality version of the video. So, as I said, my name is Ariel. I'm a 3D designer and CX manager here at CLO in our New York City office. And a little bit about what we're going to be going over today is basically everything you would need to get started using CLO. We're going to go over a little bit about Connect, so our platform for sharing and selling 3D assets. We're going to be downloading something from there, importing an avatar, importing a pattern, arranging the pattern, sewing it, applying fabrics, prints, colors, and graphics. And finally, we're going to end with a really nice, pretty render. So I hope you guys enjoy this video today and learn a little or a lot about CLO and really how to get started using CLO. So without further ado, where we are going to start is how to actually download what we need to use besides CLO. And that is going to be downloaded from our Connect store right here. So we recently created a CLO Designer YouTube live channel with our friendly little Clomelian. And you'll see here, Intro to CLO Dress, October 10th. So again, that was the date of our original live session, but for today, we're going to want to download this. Now, you can click on this little shopping cart icon, and that is going to instantly add the item to your cart. Or if you want to look further into it, you can click on the thumbnail to get a more in-depth view. Again, you'll see the thumbnail. As you scroll down, you'll see that it came from a design source from our Connect store. You can activate a 3D viewer to see the full 3D built style, as well as some additional attachments that this is going to come with. Now, we're going to have the finished style for us to look at as a reference, but really what we're going to want is our DXF or pattern file, as well as a PNG for some textures, a tag we're going to add, and a fun little graphic. I'm going to go ahead to the right and add to cart. Add to cart. And now I can actually see in the upper right-hand corner a little number 1 next to my cart. Perfect. It's been added there for me. Once into my cart section, I'm ready to check out. Now, pay attention. This is a free asset for you guys to use. So if I come over here, it says total is 0. I just have to agree to the Connect terms and service and click place order. Perfect. Now, once I've gone to the place order, what's nice is CLO will automatically take me to my purchase tab. And within the purchase tab, I can click the checkbox or just download the item that I want. So I want to download this asset so that we can use it in CLO. Okay, right here, we'll get a pop-up asking what format, ZPRJ, that is a CLO project file. So we're going to click download. Perfect. And we can actually see right here, I get a pop-up. All right, so once we have our downloads folder open, we will see that there is a folder that's been downloaded. It is currently a zip folder. We can know that by seeing this little zipper across the folder thumbnail. Something important with CLO is that a zipped folder cannot actually be linked into CLO, so we do need to unzip this. Now, it might be slightly different if you're on a PC or if you're on a Mac, and I am on a PC just for everyone's reference, so I'm going to click on this folder, and up to the right here, it says Extract All. So I'm going to go ahead, Extract All, and I'm going to just extract this right into my downloads folder, which is completely fine. Again, selecting extract, and I now see another folder here that has been extracted. And if I click in, I can actually see everything that comes into that folder. So there is a DXF, which is a pattern. We have a graphic, a blue and white stripe, a tag, which is going to be another graphic we're going to use today, as well as actually a final dress build with the dress actually already all sewn together. That is a CLO project file, and that's for you guys to use as a reference if you want to look at it to compare yours to mine. All right, but now that we have our files all downloaded, let's go ahead and jump into CLO. So right here, I already have CLO launched on my monitor, and I am on version 2025.1.240, and we can always know what version we're on by looking in the lower left-hand corner. Now, one really big change or difference that I want to point out as we're talking about the UI in a moment is if you're ever looking at an older CLO tutorial, you might see the word library here on the left-hand side. The CLO Library, as of 2025, was updated and moved to this little linked icon, kind of teal linked icon in the upper right-hand corner. We're going to go over the library in a minute, but just in case you're curious and you're looking at an old tutorial and they're like, oh, they're opening the library on the left-hand side, you'll know it's just this button on the upper right-hand corner now. Now let's talk about what we're actually looking at here with our CLO windows. On our left-hand side, we have our 3D window. So this is where our avatar is going to live. This is where our garment, once it's all sewn together, is going to live. Besides that, on the left-hand side, we have our 3D toolbar. And we have this little vertical toggle here, and this is visuals that can be turned on or off. Now, if you want to dig deeper into vertical toggles, there is a really good tutorial on our CLO YouTube already. Literally type in vertical toggles, and that tutorial is going to come right on up. On our 2D side, this is where our pattern is going to live. So this is where like the flat pattern, or what I like to think of as being my pattern cutting table, is. We have again, another 2D vertical toggle, again, giving us more or less information depending on what we choose to turn on or off. We have our 2D toolbar. So we'll start using a lot of these tools later today. And then from there, our object browser in the right-hand side, which I like to think of as being our BOM, or bill of materials, where things like our fabrics, graphics, buttons, buttonholes, top stitching, all of that is going to live. I'm currently in my fabric tab, so I just see a little fabric one, and below that we have our property editor. Now currently the property editor is blank, mostly due to the fact that we have actually nothing selected at the moment. But once we do go ahead and select something, for example, if I click on fabric one, the property editor will populate below with any and all information about whatever I have just clicked on. So it's a really great way to dig a little deeper into something you're looking at. All right, so we've talked about a little bit about our user interface. Now, what if your user interface maybe looks a little different than mine? That is completely okay. If we do want to check anything, this is where we can go to the top of our screen where it says Settings, User Settings. And opening up our user settings, we can start to take a look at the different items that can be changed. So on the left-hand side, graphics options, I'm going to leave these all as the default. Next here for view controls. This is probably one of the most important things to take a look at because we need to make sure we have a proper mouse setup. Now, I am using a 3-button mouse. So right here, little 3-button mouse, right click, left click, and a center scroll wheel. You might have a different type of mouse. Maybe you're on a Mac and you have a Magic Mouse. You could select that type of mouse. Just keep in mind, if you are on a Magic Mouse, your commands might be slightly different than mine due to, again, it being a Magic Mouse and not a regular mouse. For everyone to know, a regular mouse is the most common and what we recommend people using for CLO. It's what I will be using for the entirety of this tutorial. Next, over here, we have our Shortcuts tab. We're going to be using nothing but the default shortcuts, but this is somewhere where if you wanted to personalize shortcuts in the future when you become more comfortable with CLO, you can do so. We have our user interface. Again, another great way to be able to customize this. Unit system, I'm going to be using inches. Again, I live in the US. It's a system that we work with pretty often, but again, you have the option for centimeters or millimeters as well. Decimal points, so depending on how far you need to go in your decimal system, you can go from 1 to 5 decimals. I also have use line L for button width. Now, the line system is what I'm personally most familiar with, so I do have this checked on. Now, we're not going to be using any buttons today, but a nice thing to know, you can turn on or off depending on how you use or work with buttons. Below, again, default top stitch, I have it set to text. That is also the default. Currency, I have mine set to US dollars. Mode and toolbar. Default mode simulation. 3D and 2D toolbars are set to the left and the right side. Again, these are actually the defaults in CLO, so you probably won't even need to change anything. Now, a few ones that are kind of optional or personal here are group tools. I have group tools turned off. This means that my toolbar exposes all the tools that it has space for. I have a rather large monitor here, so it is really clear and easy for me to see. If you choose to group them, they're just, again, going to be hidden under other tools, and you might need to left click and hold to expose another tool. Show manual and video links. I do recommend, especially if you're a newer user, to leave this checked on. This just means that when you hover over a tool later on, there'll be a little link there that you can jet off onto the CLO website and find a tool, a article or a little tutorial or a video about a tool in case you don't know how it works. Below here, appearance. I am going to leave everything as the default. All the colors, you'll know what those are. Sometimes, though, people might want to change the font size here from 10. That's what I have mine at. But again, if you have a smaller monitor, or maybe you like to have bigger letters or font size, you can increase that. Everything else here, again, is currently pretty much the default. The last and final thing, this is more for PC than for Mac users, is your scaling of CLO. So maybe when you launch CLO, you notice that everything is really, really big, or everything is really tiny. You can turn off automatic scale and then select a different resolution that is better for your computer or your monitor. This might take a little experimentation because you do need to restart CLO if you check on a different option, but good to know it's there in case something looks a little odd. All right. Our 3D, we're going to be leaving everything as is back on our left-hand side. Same with 2D, we're going to leave everything to the default. The last thing we might want to actually change is if we go into default files and scroll down to autosave. My time interval here is set to 5 minutes. Default is 10, so you can leave it as 10. That is completely fine, but I like to bring it to 5. It just means that in case something happens, I forgot to plug in my laptop, something happens and CLO crashes for any reason, CLO is going to be doing an autosave in the background. Just keep in mind, there is only ever one autosave at a time, but what's nice is if CLO crashes for any reason, the next time I launch CLO will ask, do I want to open an autosave? And I'm like, oh, heck yes, I do. I don't want to lose all that work. I wouldn't lose more than 4 minutes and 59 seconds of work, which is not too bad. I would not recommend ever lowering it lower, because if CLO is constantly trying to do autosaves in the background, it will slow down your computer. So just keep that in mind. And that is really all we need to take a look at in our user settings. From there, I'm going to close, and we are ready to go. Where do we start when we're ready to work on a project and we have a pattern that we're going to be using? For that, as I mentioned above, we have our CLO Library. Also, you'll notice that as I hover over CLO Library, there's a little drop down that appears that says the name of the tool. Parentheses, it says the shortcut. So the shortcut to open and close the library is Y. And as well, there's a little manual button. That's what I was talking about, to keep the tooltips on. So if I wanted to, I could click that manual. But I'm going to go ahead and click the CLO Library. And this is going to open up again the CLO Library. Now, there are 3 main tabs within the CLO Library. There is the CLO tab, and this is going to be all of our default assets. Right now, we're in the Garment tab, which comes with just a few little random garments. Now, very important here, do not save your own personal assets in any of these folders. I always like to mention this. We do not want to save items in these folders, because if in the future, for any reason, you have to uninstall CLO, guess what? Everything that you've saved in those folders is going to go poof when you uninstall CLO. We're going to actually be linking the folder in a little bit, so that way you'll never have to worry about that happening. But within the default folders, we have garments, avatars, fabrics, trims, and stages. The next tab over is our CLO Set tab. So the CLO Set is CLO's kind of cloud communication, makes tech packs, all sorts of really cool stuff. So if in future you want to go and check that out, closet.com. And as well, we have the Connect tab here. So we are actually already on the Connect website. There is also a tab in Connect, or in CLO for Connect. So that's really nice to be able to have that right there. Now you're going to actually see I have a whole bunch of other extra things that you probably do not have. And that's because I had clicked this plus icon to start linking different folders in CLO. In fact, I already have CLO Live linked for me right here. But let's go ahead and be like, all right, let's start from scratch. Let's go ahead and link the folder we want to be using for CLO. Now, currently, most likely your folder is in your downloads. If you wanted to create a folder directly on your desktop, call it CLO Live or CLO Tutorials, you can definitely do that. In fact, I recommend that. Otherwise, things often get lost in the downloads folder. But if we want to link a new file, new folder, we click this plus icon and choose Create New Library. We're going to get a gray screen right here and says Add Folder. So basically I'm like, oh, perfect. Let me go add a folder. Now, for my add folder, this is going to open up my desktop Finder. For me, it's in my downloads. And what I can do is select this folder right here, Intro to CLO. Perfect. When I select that, I can choose Select Folder because I want to link not only the folder, but everything inside it. So I just want the folder linked. And right there, we can see there's been a new tab added with all of the assets added. Perfect. I'm ready to go. In fact, I actually have my CLO Live previously linked. I called it CLO Live Kickstart, so I'm going to go into that folder. But one thing to keep in mind is if you double click where it says My Library, it will activate a text box, which is really nice. So that way you can actually label these. So if you want to link in your own personal folders on your computer with prints, graphics, patterns, really, the sky's the limit. Go ahead and link those. You can link all sorts of different things in CLO, which is really nice. Or I can add in additional folders right here. So maybe I have prints that are in a whole bunch of different locations on my computers. I can make one main folder called prints and then add in all the different folder locations on the left-hand side. Again, very customizable to how you choose you want to work. But now that we see our different items here, I do want to point out at the upper right-hand corner, we can choose icon view or list view for how we are viewing things in our library. Again, very up to you as the user. I'm a big fan of icons. Beyond that, there is a little italic I for showing info. Now, these items don't have a lot of info in them, so there isn't much to see. But for a lot of the CLO default assets that we're going to be using later, it is really nice to have this italic I checked on so I can see additional information. And to start, we're going to add in our CLO 01 dress pattern. In order to do that, I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose Add to Workspace. Okay, so once we actually have our Add DXF pop-up, this is where we're going to have a lot of different options. So don't get too overwhelmed right off the bat. It's your first CLO project. But here we have our load type. It is set to add, which means if we did have things already open in our CLO file, our project would be added to whatever is currently existing. Units, auto scale. 99% of the time, auto scale is going to be the option you want. And it's going to be pretty clear that it isn't correct, usually because something will come in really tiny or really, really big. You're like, oh, that's not the right size. Here, for all the next below, I'm going to pretty much leave everything as their basic options. Rotation, do not rotate. Reset grain line, maintain original. A lot of this is for if you are using other softwares like AccuMark or Gerber, and you're bringing them in from those programs, you might need to adjust or change things, but I'm usually going to maintain everything. Below here, importing pattern annotation. So if there were annotations or notes added to a pattern piece, those would appear. There aren't any annotations on this file. Auto trace as internal lines. We're going to talk about what internal lines are, but again, mostly if you're working with other softwares that also do pattern making and bringing them into CLO, it's how you choose to activate those different lines. Next, swap cutting lines and sewing lines, and then also include notches. What CLO does is everything comes together edge to edge, even though CLO definitely knows seam allowance is a thing. Don't worry. This just makes sure that when you're putting your patterns together in CLO, it removes the excess seam allowance that you don't visually need in the 3D window. Importing seam allowance notch only. Again, just another option. So if you're doing seam allowance and you want just to get those notches. Notch position, this is very personal to you. If you want a fixed notch that even if you edit the pattern, the notch stays stationary, or ratio, whereas you adjust the pattern, the notch might move up or down to maintain that overall ratio where it is between 2 points. Auto distribute, I will say this one can be nice to turn on if you're bringing in patterns from other softwares. It just makes sure that the patterns don't come in all sandwiched together and they are spread out. Optimizing curve points. Now, for this pattern, I'm not worried about it, but sometimes even when you're importing from other softwares, you might come in with thousands of curve points, and CLO will do its best job to minimize those different curve points and have less of them. Import or draw curve points when curve is not loaded. Again, optional depending on where the pattern is coming from. We don't need to worry about that for today. Removing non-graded points. We're not going to be talking about grading today either, but there is a great grading tutorial that talks about the different grading tools on our YouTube, as well as convert to seam allowance, which kind of links back to the earlier swapping cutting lines and sewing lines. It will convert seam allowance to close seam allowance, which is kind of nice to have if you need it and you're going to be moving more close to actual production. Right, so I'm leaving these settings right here, and I'm going to click OK. Now, in order to, obviously, I would like to see my 2D and 3D screens. In the upper right-hand corner, I can click this X to close my library, or I can press Y. There we go. And that is just going to close my library. And what I can see are in my 3D window, a bunch of patterns, and same in my 2D window, patterns. They are, again, they're kind of laid out the same, 2D to 3D. And something important to keep in mind is these items or these windows work in sync with one another. Now, before we can start actually putting our dress together, we're kind of missing a key item here. We're missing an avatar or a mannequin or a fit model or basically someone to actually wear our garment. Otherwise, it's like the real world. If I turned on simulation or gravity, it's all just going to fall onto the floor, which isn't really what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to press Y on my keyboard to reopen my library. And I'm going to go to our CLO tab right here. So this CLO, and this is again our CLO default library. And I'm going to go to the Avatar tab on the left-hand side. Now, once we open up the Avatar tab, we're going to see lots of different options here. Baby, female, hangers, kids, male, mannequin, metahuman, kind of fun with Unreal Engine, and shapes. These are great for handbags and accessory items to build around those. Today, we're going to be using a mannequin. So I'm going to double click this folder. And inside those mannequins, I'm going to see there's a baby, female, a kid or teen, and then as well a male mannequin. So I'm going to open up this FV 2.1 mannequin avatar. Note the .abt means it is an avatar. And I'm going to double click to open, or actually here, always say if we're adding her. So I lied. I'm going to right click and I'm going to add to workspace. And now if I move my library a little bit out of the way, I can see that there is an avatar in my 3D space as well as the shadow of the avatar in my 2D space. Again, these windows are always working in sync. One thing I do want to point out, and it's just good for reference for the future, is if I want to go back, these are set up the new CLO library is set up to be very similar or mimic kind of how we find or activate the windows in our regular PCs or Macs. So where it says mannequin, I can click avatar and it goes back one folder. And for reference here, I'm just going to go into this female folder. This is where additional CLO avatars live. So if you wanted to work with something that isn't a mannequin and it actually looks more like a person, there is Luna, which is one of the newer CLO avatars. She's like a teenager. Then we have Mia, Naomi, and Yuna. Those are the kind of current main CLO avatars. From there, we have accessory folders. This is where hair, shoes, things like that are going to live. Motion, so if you ever get into animation in CLO. Poses. We're going to talk about that a little later today, as well as sizes. So again, pretty often you're going to be building things that aren't just in a model-esque height. So you could actually open up the size folder, and within there are EU sizes, ASTM, Missy, curvy, petite, plus size, teenage size, maternity sizes. So there's a lot of different sizes. The one key thing I always try to ask people to remember here is you need to have an avatar in the scene, because what you're going to do is take your avatar file, .avt, and apply a size file, or .avs for size. So just keep that in mind if you're using different sizes. But we have our avatar, we've got our pattern. I'm going to again press Y on my keyboard to close the library, and we can start to arrange our different pattern pieces. Now, when we want to arrange our different pattern pieces, we might also want to know how to navigate our scene. So let's actually talk about navigation and then arrange our pattern pieces together. Now, navigation is zooming, panning, and rotating in CLO. Now, in order to zoom, I'm again on a regular mouse, so I can use my scroll wheel to zoom out or zoom in. Fun thing, if you hover over a pattern piece, it actually focuses on wherever your cursor is in the 2D side. Zoom out a little. Same with my 3D window. I can zoom in and zoom out with my scroll wheel. The next option here is the ability to pan. Now, in order to pan, I will also be using my scroll wheel, but instead of scrolling it or rolling it, I'm going to click and hold it down. And you'll notice how my cursor became a little fist icon. And now I can drag up, down, right, left. And that is going to work the exact same in my 3D window. I can click and hold my scroll wheel and move in these different directions. The final way to kind of navigate within the windows is going to be only on the 3D side, and that is the ability to rotate, because again, CLO is a 3D program. I'm going to use my right click. I'm going to hold it. You'll notice how my cursor became a little kind of circle. And now I can rotate around, above, and underneath my avatar, which is kind of cool. Now, what happens if I have zoomed in or out, or kind of almost have her hanging like a bat on the ceiling instead of her on the floor? A really good shortcut to remember on your keyboard is the number 2. The number 2 on your keyboard is basically avatar front and center. What's also nice is in my 3D space, so if I kind of click or right click in the gray space of the 3D window, I can get a drop down, and we'll see here front, the number 2 next to it. But what's nice is there are also lots of additional options of bottom, top, 3/4 right, right, left, back. So we can choose these different options if we want. And again, on the right hand side, that's just CLO giving you a handy visual way to start remembering the different shortcuts. Perfect. All right, so I'm going to kind of zoom out. So I have my avatar nice and center in my 3D. And same here for my 2D side. I want to be able to see all of my different pattern pieces. And I'm ready to start organizing these. Now, we are going to be using our Transform Pattern tool, shortcut A, if you're curious. And it's going to look like a solid triangle in its top left corner of our 2D toolbar. I'm going to click Transform Pattern to make sure I'm using that. Now, what this tool does is it allows us to select entire pattern pieces. So if I click on a pattern piece, it is fully selected, and I can then move them around. So I'm going to take this half pattern here with the lower neck drop, and I'm going to place this in front of that shadow of my avatar. What I really recommend doing is building out your pattern pieces in 2D in a nice organized way, kind of around the shadow of the avatar. I always like to say, future you is going to thank past you for staying organized now. I know, silly and cheesy, but so very true. I'm going to take my sleeve and put that a little off to the right. I'm going to take my back pattern and put this to the right. So what I'm thinking is, oh, I have a side seam here, and I definitely know that this side seam is going to be sewn to it, so it's going to make my sewing a little easier later on. From there, I'm going to align up the skirt patterns below the corresponding bodices. And also I'm going to take my neckband and place that just above here where it's going to live. Just again, organizing your patterns is very up to you as the user, but if you find a method that you really like and enjoy and it makes sense to you, that's perfect. This is just my personal way that I like to arrange them. From there, I really usually often like to make sure that my 3D and 2D windows are constantly being reflected. There is what's very nice, a easy peasy shortcut right here. Looks like on our 3D toolbar, and it looks like a little t-shirt cut into quarters, and it's called Reset 2D Arrangement All. Note all because it's going to do every single pattern piece. And if I click that button, the pattern pieces in my 3D window are now mimicking how they are set up in my 2D window. Just a really nice way to stay organized. Now, I kind of like, well, I only have half a dress. Might be really good to actually go ahead and, or have the other halves of these patterns. I'm going to start with my sleeve. I do need two sleeves. I need a right and I need a left. And I'm going to right click on this pattern piece. So I'm right clicking directly on the pattern piece. And I'm going to come over within the drop down. You're going to see kind of a gray text. Sorry, it's a little hard to see sometimes, but it says clone pattern with linked editing. And then there's 3 different options below. I want this very first option, symmetric pattern with sewing. And again, to the right, it says the little shortcut, Control D. I like to remember this by thinking D for duplicate, because that is about what we're going to do. We're going to duplicate that sleeve pattern. So to repeat that, I'm going to right click on my sleeve, and I'm going to choose symmetric pattern parentheses with sewing. And I'm going to get a yellow outline of my sleeve. Notice how it is actually mirror reflected, because again, we have right and left arms, which are slightly different. And I'm going to place this just over to the left-hand side. Perfect. Now, something fun you might also notice is that there is a blue glow around these pattern pieces and a blue line connecting them. This is letting us visually know that these are symmetrically linked patterns. If I edit one, the other one is going to edit with it, which is really nice. Who doesn't wish that they only had to edit something once and the other side would magically do so? This is especially going to help us when we sew the dress together in a little bit. Now I need to unfold the remainder of these different pattern pieces. Now notice with my transform, it selects the entire pattern piece, and I don't want to actually duplicate these. I want to unfold these. In order to be able to unfold a pattern, I want to switch to the Edit Pattern tool. So this one, it lives directly below transform pattern. I always say, the transform pattern is a solid triangle. The edit pattern is a hollow triangle. And this is again called the edit pattern parentheses or shortcut Z. Switching to this tool, it's going to allow me to select individual lines or points on pattern pieces. And I'm going to start by selecting what will be the center front of my bodice here. So notice how I am clicking on this line. I'm getting a little bit of extra information actually. So I'm actually seeing, oh, the line is 19.954 inches and even angles of where these points are. So CLO is also always trying to give us a little extra info if we need it. I'm going to right click directly on that yellow line. And from that drop down, I'm going to come closer to the bottom of the drop down, unfold symmetric editing with sewing. So again, right clicking directly on the yellow line in 2D, and then choosing unfold symmetric editing with sewing. And that pattern piece is going to completely unfold. Now the difference you might see is while our sleeves, which are 2 separate pattern pieces, have that line connecting them and a blue glow, a half symmetric pattern will actually have kind of a dividing or dashed line down the middle. And this is just letting us know the right and the left sides are equal. But again, it's one pattern piece. You're like, oh gosh, I guess I have to do this for all these other pattern pieces. Now, what's really nice about CLO is there is the ability to do it all at once. I'm going to, again, edit pattern tool. I'm going to select the center back of my bodice. Now, I want to be able to select multiple. So very similar to a lot of other programs, I'm going to hold Shift on my keyboard. So clicking on this center back of my bodice, I am now holding Shift on my keyboard. I'm going to select the center back of the skirt and the center front of what will be our skirt. So I have 3 separate lines selected. I can release my shift now. I'm not going to select anymore. What I want to do is right-click directly on one of those yellow lines. As long as it's highlighted, you can right-click on it. And from there, unfold symmetric editing with sewing. And that's going to do it for all the pattern pieces at once. It works also similar to sleeves. We were only duplicating one sleeve, but it is really nice to know that you can do that if you want to. All right. Oh, excuse me. All right. Now that we have all of our pattern pieces duplicated, we're ready to start arranging them around our actual avatar. We need them to, wrap around her just like a garment would wrap around the human body. And in order to do that, the first thing I like to do is move the pattern pieces visually out of the way in the 3D window. I'm going to use the shortcut Control A. So again, Control A on my keyboard. If you're on a Mac, I believe that's going to be Command A. And that selects all of my different pattern pieces. Now, if you aren't a big fan of keyboard shortcuts, that's totally fine as well. We can switch back to our Transform Pattern tool and marquee over the pattern pieces till they're all inside the marquee box fully, and release, and all those pattern pieces are selected the same way. What's nice is if you select them in 2D, they're also selected in 3D. And we have here is a gizmo. Now this gizmo is how we can actually move in a 3D space with precision. They're very common to see in other 3D softwares as well. And they allow us to rotate or move along a certain axis. We're going to talk mostly just about the straight arrows. So that is our X, Y, and Z axis. So X is our horizontal axis, Y is our vertical axis, and Z is our forwards and backwards. What I like to do when it comes to looking at these gizmos is look at it from a 45-degree bird's eye angle. And that's because it's going to give me a very clear visual path, and none of those circles are blocking any of the arrows then. I'm going to take the green arrow, and as I highlight over it, bring that up and out of the way. Again, just clicking with my left click and dragging. Now, one thing I want to point out, I should have said this first, is if your gizmo might look a little different than mine, that's totally fine. There are different types of gizmos in CLO. But if you want to change yours to look like how mine does, in the 3D window, we can right-click in the gray space, similar to what we did to see those kind of visual shortcuts for how we can look at things, and come down to Gizmo. There are 3 different types: screen, local, and world. I'm a big fan of the world coordinate. I think it's the easiest one to use, especially when you're newer to CLO. So I'm going to make sure to select world coordinate. And now whenever I click on something in the 3D window, your gizmo should look very similar to mine. Perfect. All right, well, now how the heck are we going to get her dressed and get all these pattern pieces around the actual avatar? We just moved everything super far away. To do that, we're going to need to use one of those visual options in our 3D vertical toggle. And for that, we're going to come to our avatar display. So it's the 5th icon down. There we go. We want to, what we see here are several different options. Show avatar is checked on. Again, we want to see our avatar. What we need to turn on now is this show arrangement points. And you can see the shortcut here in gray, Shift F if you're curious. So again, as I hover over these different toggles, I'm going to come over to show arrangement points and turn that on. And we have all these little blue dots that appear to be wrapping around our avatar. We're kind of ready to go. But one thing that's important, we'll talk about it, keep talking about it, is with arrangement points, I like to think of them as being CLO chicken pox. We need them. We need to get our immunity, I guess. But as soon as we're done with them, we're going to want to turn them off. Now I'm going to press the number 2 on my keyboard. And this is going to have my avatar come front and center. With my avatar front and center, I'm going to select the pattern pieces in 2D. I really just enjoy this workflow. Again, I don't want to be dragging them in the 3D window. And what's nice to remember is 2D and 3D windows are linked. If I select it in 2D, it is selected in 3D. So I am clicking on my front bodice. I'm not holding it, I'm not dragging it, but with it selected, I'm going to take my mouse over to the 3D side. And as I hover over these different blue dots, I'll get like a ghost outline of the pattern piece. Now this one at the center, right below my avatar's bust, looks like a pretty good place that this pattern piece should be arranged around here. Now, in no way do arrangement points need to be perfect. They just need to be in the ballpark. I'm going to click on this dot, again, right here below my avatar's bust line, and click. That dot is going to turn yellow. And what we can see here now is that garment isn't even flat in 3D. It's actually starting to wrap around the avatar, which is perfect. I'm going to go to my skirt next, to the front panel skirt. And this dot here, kind of right in between my avatar's thighs, is looking like a really good place to place my skirt. Click. Nice. From there, we can go ahead and we can place our sleeves. Now, one thing with sleeves, and a good thing to keep in mind with arrangement points, is they center around whatever dot you select. So if I selected this dot here at the center front, the cap of the sleeve is actually going to be kind of more towards the front of our avatar's shoulder and not to the top of it. So I might need to right click and hold to rotate my point of view so I can see the dot that's at the top of the avatar's bicep, and click. Now, one of the really nice things about CLO is you'll notice it placed on the opposite sleeve as well, because again, we have symmetry. Now, one thing to always pay attention to, it gets everybody at some point, is to make sure the right sleeve goes on the right arm and the left sleeve goes on the left arm. Otherwise, you might end up with them kind of being on the opposite sides. So here I can see if I select this sleeve to my right, it is on to my right. So I know that they're on the correct arm. Always important. I'm going to go ahead and rotate around my avatar. I'm going to select my back bodice. Again, hovering over these different dots. This dot right here at her center back looks pretty good. Click, places the pattern piece. And next here around my skirt, this one right below her derriere looks pretty good at the center. So I'm going to click to place that dot, or place the pattern piece on that dot. We have all of our pattern pieces placed except for our neckband. Now, for our neckband, if I zoom out, we can still see it kind of chilling up here in space. I'm going to select my neckband. I'm going to right click on it. We get a drop down when we right click on this in the 3D window, and I'm going to choose to freeze it. Really ready to arrange it yet, so I'm going to freeze it. It's going to become this icy blue color. Show all, make sure you can see it. It becomes this icy blue color, and that is how I know that this pattern piece is kind of frozen in space. I'm also, again, we've arranged our pattern pieces. I don't need those arrangement points anymore. Coming back to my avatar display, show arrangement points, and I'm going to turn that off. Perfect. I'm also going to turn on quality render, which is a different way CLO will read prints and layouts and transparencies, but it does tend to also make the 3D window a little easier to see on a screen share. So I'm just turning that on. Now, if I turned on simulation, just watch my screen, don't do it. I'm going to press my space bar. The garment just falls right on off of her. So I'm going to Control Z to undo. And we need to actually start sewing our garment together. Now, our sewing tools are located on our 2D toolbar. And there are 3 main sewing tools available to us. We have Edit Sewing, Segment Sewing, and Free Sewing. Now, with these different tools, they each do some slightly different things. Segment sewing and free sewing will actually add in sewing. Edit sewing will delete it, remove it, edit it in certain ways once it has been added. Now, I usually like to start with my Edit Sewing tool, and this is going to, again, usually just be a really good way to start adding that sewing. So I'm going to select Segment Sewing. And with my Segment Sewing, I'm going to, couple little tips for it is it's going to be a total of 2 clicks. What am I sewing and what is it being sewn to? And for the sewing, it's actually going to sew between 2 segment points. So those black dots, if you notice as I hover over this side seam of my skirt, it's highlighting between 2 black or segment points. There is also a little dash or notch, we could think of it. Now this dash or notch will move depending on where my cursor is. If it's closer to the bottom, that little dash will be at the bottom. If my mouse is closer to the top, it will be at the top. Now, I like to think of this as kind of what is going through the machine first, and it's also a way to make sure we match our sewing so nothing becomes twisted. So like I said, segment sewing is a total of 2 clicks. So I'm going to notch the top of the side of my skirt, click, just once. And now I'm going to take my mouse or cursor over to the opposite side seam here that's going to be sewn together to. Again, making sure to match my notches. We don't want to twist. And with the notch also to the top of this opposite side, click. And that is going to come together. In fact, if we look in our 3D window, we can see those nice straight sewing lines. And the best part, because we have symmetry, it does it to both sides of the skirt panel. So we only have to do it once. I mean, I kind of really, really love that. I mean, it's really one of my personal favorite things in CLO. Symmetry is absolutely great. So let's take a look and see what other things we can use to sew together with our segment sewing. Well, the bottom of my bodice and the top of my skirt here are looking like a pretty good option. So again, I'm going to always match my notches. So I'm going to sew the bottom of my bodice, notch towards the left, the top of my skirt, notch to the left. Again, because we have symmetry, it did the right and the left side at the same time. I love this. I don't have to do it twice. Coming now to my back, let's do that again. Now, you'll just notice I tend to like to put my notch to the left. It's just a personal preference. Not right or wrong if you prefer to do everything right or right to left or left to right, top to bottom, bottom to top. And I'm going to, again, come to the right side of my bottom bodice, notch to the left, and I'm going to sew that to the top of the skirt. Again, making sure my notches are nice and straight. Perfect. What do we do if accidentally, for some reason, we might possibly mess up the sewing? Maybe it's twisted. Maybe I put it in the wrong spot. I'm going to show you guys what happens if you do it incorrectly. It's so easy to fix. Now, my example, I'm going to sew my undersleeve wrong incorrectly. So if you want to just watch instead of following along, that's totally fine. I'm going to sew the left side of my underarm sleeve, notch to the top, to the opposite side, but this time notch to the bottom. We can already kind of see how we're getting crisscrosses on the sewing. In fact, if we even go and rotate and look in my 3D window, we can see that those sewing lines aren't going perfectly straight across the avatar's underarm. They're twisted. So what do we do, or what do we want to look at now? Instead, I'm going to switch to my Edit Sewing tool. Now this is the tool where I could choose to delete the sewing and just do it all over again if I wanted to. But one of the really nice things is I can select this sewing, I can right click on it. Here we can see reverse the sewing. There's also delete. So again, we could choose to delete it, but the sewing's in the right place, so I don't actually need to delete it. I want to reverse it. So I'm going to choose reverse sewing. CLO is going to flip the notch on that side, and look how the sewing is actually nice and straight. Perfect. And from there, I can actually jump right back into segment sewing. So for our next little bit of segment sewing, I am going to sew together my shoulders. So shoulders, again, can sometimes be just visually a little tricky, but don't worry. Just take your time. It's never a bad thing to slow down, take your time, pause the video, watch the video multiple times. It's all good. I'm going to sew my front shoulder, notch coming towards the neckline. Click. I'm then going to take this across to my back shoulder. Again, making sure this time notch going towards the neckline. Again, because we want to match those notches, and we know that this is wrapping around our avatar or body. Click. Never a bad idea to also just be watching your 3D screen at the exact same time, and I can see that it's sewing nicely front to back, straight across the shoulders. I didn't sew a shoulder incorrectly or anything like that, and I'm all good to go. All right, next we're going to do our arms. Oh, so actually we are going to go ahead and we're going to do our side seams. Now, one thing I can see is really nice if I could just sew these side seams in one continuous go without having to worry about this segment point here. I'm going to switch to my free sewing tool. So the one tool on our 2D toolbar that's directly below segment sewing is called free sewing. Selecting the free sewing. Now the biggest difference between segment and free is while segments was a total of 2 clicks, free sewing is going to be a total of 4 clicks. A start and an end to the first section, and then a start and an end to what that's being sewn to. I'm going to start at the underarm of my bodice, single click, and I'm hovering my mouse. Now I'm not holding left click or anything like that. I did a single left click to start, and I'm hovering my mouse. What's nice is because it's free sewing, it's going to allow me to jump right over that point. I'm not clicking on it or anything like that. I'm just keeping my mouse moving downward. And when I get to this bottom point where it's going to meet our skirt, I'm going to click. So that was the first 2 clicks. Now I'm going to follow that very same kind of path, but on my back bodice. Clicking at the back underarm, single click, hover, 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 hovering my mouse, keep going. And what's really nice is CLO right here is going to give us this kind of dark blue or navy picking dot. And that's CLO's way of telling us, hey, if you want your sewing to be nice and even, end at this dot here. Perfect. So I'm going to come down till I get to that dot and click. That's a total of 4 clicks. And so it's completely done both sides of my side seams. Awesome. All right, now there's one more type of sewing that can be done, and that is the ability to sew one to multiple. Now, when will we want to do one to multiple? A sleeve is a perfect example of this. A sleeve is usually sewn, one sleeve pattern to a front and back bodice. Now, one to multiples, the key here is we need to do our one first, in this case, our sleeve cap. So I'm going to click on the left side of my sleeve cap once, hovering my mouse. I'm not going to stop at the top where this segment point is. I'm going to keep going till I get to the opposite side of the armhole, or click. Now, here's the new step. I need to press and hold Shift on my keyboard. Now you'll see how my sewing has turned to bright green. The key is I cannot release my shift until I've done all of the different multiples, in this case, the front and back armhole. So my hand right here, my left hand is currently glued, super glued, however you want to think of it, to the Shift key on my keyboard. Now, again, we want to follow a similar path. So since my sewing started at the underarm, I'm going to start at my front underarm, click, hovering, 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 till I get to this shoulder point. I'm going to click, still holding Shift. Now this click is going to let me, though, jump to the next pattern piece, following kind of that armhole in a circle. I'm going to start at the top of the shoulder of the back bodice, click, and come down the armhole till I get all the way to the underarm point. I'm actually skipping over that blue picking dot because often sleeves might have some sort of ease in them, so the sewing isn't always going to be even. I'm going to click right here. And now, because I've sewn both my front and back armholes, I've sewn the multiples, I can release Shift on my keyboard, and CLO is going to evenly spread out the sewing to the front and the back. I love it. Don't be afraid if you need to watch that 1 or 2 times, or even, put in a question or comment in the chat below, and our team will help to answer it later on. All right, now we have everything sewn but the neckband. But remember, the neckband's frozen. I'm not worried about it. Let's actually go ahead and do what's always something that's kind of a wow moment. We want to simulate. And in order to turn on simulation, we do need to go to our 3D window. I'm going to just go back to my Select Move tool. And something I like to do, doesn't matter how long I've been working in CLO, I always will do one slow rotation around my avatar to make sure I didn't make any weird mistakes or errors. Errors to be human. And if everything overall is looking pretty good, I can turn on gravity or simulation. Now, the simulate button is on the upper left-hand corner of the 3D toolbar, and it looks like a large downward arrow. Now, yours might look a little different than mine. That's okay. Something to keep in mind is actually, let me zoom right back in here. If you ever see this gray triangle on a tool button, that just means that there are additional hidden options below. And if I click and hold, I'm going to see that there are 3 types of simulation and the options for CPU and GPU. Now, I am using GPU. It is actually quite a bit faster. Just a heads up, as of this release of 2025.1, GPU is PC only. So Max, hopefully you guys will get that soon. But I am on GPU, which is why my downward arrow is an outline and not solid. Beyond that, there is normal, fitting, accurate, and animation. Now, animation would only be used when you are doing an animation. Fitting accurate will bring everything, will be the most accurate version, but it's also the slowest version. So normally you wouldn't get into fitting accurate until you're actually near the very end of a project. But for the most part, 90% of the time you'd be working in normal or default, and this is going to allow you to work close to accurate, but also very quickly. Pardon me. So I'm going to make sure I have on normal, and I can either click on this arrow to activate it or press spacebar. Spacebar is the shortcut for this tool and is one of the ones I highly recommend memorizing early. So I'm going to go ahead and press my spacebar, and my dress simulates together around my avatar. And in fact, my cursor is now a little hand or pinch tool, and I can pinch and move this, maybe giving it any tugs, maybe something got a little wiggly or stuck. We can give it a couple pinches. It's looking pretty good. I'm pretty pleased with that. And then I'm going to either press the simulation button again or press spacebar to turn simulation off. We don't really want to leave that running in the background forever. But I think everything is looking pretty good. I'm overall quite happy with that. Of course, we do still need to add in our avatar's neckband. So let's go ahead and add in or attach the neckband to the rest of our garment. I'm going to use that 1 to multiples again, always a good chance to practice this. So I want to sew my 1 neckband to my front and back neckline. I'm going to use free sewing again, and I'm going to sew my neckband bottom left corner all the way across the bottom to the bottom right. Now that I've set my 1 sewing for my neckband, again, I'm going to hold Shift on my keyboard. That's going to turn on that bright green across. And I want to follow that kind of similar path now. I'm starting at the upper right of my HPS or high point shoulder. Click. I'm hovering my mouse, hover, 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 till I get to the opposite high point shoulder. Click. Again, once I do that second click, it's going to let me jump to my next pattern piece, and I'm going to hold down my scroll wheel so I can pan. And since these two shoulders are sewn together, I know I want to start at this left side. Click, hovering, hovering till I get to the far right side. Again, going past that blue picking dot there, because very often neckbands are stretched into place to hold that kind of curvature. So I'm going to the far right side, click, and I can release my shift. Now what we have here is a pattern piece floating up in space in some very long sewing lines. Now one thing, if I press spacebar right now, my garment would try to fly up to the frozen pattern piece, and we definitely don't want that. So to start, I'm going to make sure I'm on my select/move pattern tool in my 3D toolbar. Select that pattern piece in the 3D window, right click, unfreeze. We don't want it to be frozen anymore. Now that it's unfrozen, I could press spacebar and kind of let it fly and hope for the best. But there's another option we can use. And this is really good for when you're adding on things like pockets and linings and facings and cuffs. We can, or once the sewing is complete, we can use an option called superimpose. And in order to reveal that kind of option, we can right click on our toolbar, and we're going to see near the bottom 3 different superimpose options. Superimpose over, which is really great for pockets. So if let's say we had a patch pocket, we could superimpose over. Superimpose under, so maybe if we had a facing that needed to go inside the garment, under. Or in this case, for our neckband, superimpose side. It's just something like edge to edge. I'm going to choose superimpose side. It's going to snap the pattern piece, and now when I turn on simulation by pressing my space bar, it's going to activate that pattern piece. I might need to give it a tug or two, which is totally fine, but we now actually have our neckband attached. And I'm like, uh-oh, I forgot to sew the far sides of my neckband. But you know what? That's really nice and CLO. It's not like I have to go rip apart a seam or anything like that. I'm just going to go right back to my segment sewing tool, and I'm going to sew the left side of my neckband notch to the top to the right side of my neckband notch to the top. Really easy peasy. I can see that sewing's been added in my 3D window. I can press my space bar, and that little edge of the neckband has just snapped together. Easy, fast, I love it. I'm going to press 2 on my keyboard just to bring my avatar nice and front and center. Now let's talk a little bit about particle distance. So everything in CLO or in 3D is made up of a mesh. And we have different sizes of mesh that can be used. The default size is 20. So for example, if I select my bodice here and come to my property editor, which is going to tell me everything and anything about that pattern piece, I'm going to scroll down till we get to simulation properties. And the first option below is particle distance 20. Now, if you're familiar with 3D, you might already know kind of what particle distance is, but if maybe you've never used a 3D program before and you're like, what the heck is that? Let's talk about it, of course. We can actually see our mesh if I come to my 2D vertical toggle, go to the second button from the bottom called Garment Rendering Style, and I'm going to turn on Show Mesh. And here's the mesh. Everything is made up of almost like a spider web of triangles. Now, when we're working with this mesh, when we get into really high levels for beautiful rendering, high res, fitting, things like that. We want to be in a really small particle distance and really teeny tiny triangles. But pretty often, if we do that too early and we're still editing, we're still working, it's going to go really, really slow. So larger pattern pieces like my bodice or my skirt here, I'm going to leave at a particle distance of 20. But smaller ones, let's say for a good example, the sleeves, they're not very big, they're short sleeves. I'm going to hold shift and select both right and left sleeves. I'm going to come to my property editor. Again, where it says simulation properties, particle distance, I'm going to click on that text box where it says 20 and type in 10 and press enter. We can actually see now how the sleeve is made up of even smaller triangles now. And if I come over to my 3D window and press my spacebar, the sleeves are going to drape but just a little bit differently now, a little bit more smooth. A really good example, though, that we're about to do is the neckband. We can actually see the particles here. Because this neckband is such a tiny piece, we can kind of very clearly see those little grooves where the triangles are. In 2D, I'm going to select my neckband, and I'm actually going to bring this all the way up to what we consider high res in CLO, and that is a particle distance of 5. So a good rule of thumb is if your pattern piece is the equivalent of like the size of your hands put together. Good examples, plackets, collars, cuffs, a neckband like this. It's so small, I can bring it to high res right away. So again, I've selected my neckband, particle distance, 20, and I'm going to actually change it to 5 and press enter. Those triangles are even tinier than the ones we just did on our sleeve. And if I press spacebar in the 3D window, we can now see how our neckband is much, much smoother around the edge. And I'm already liking how that is looking so much better. So just something nice that you can keep in mind if you ever need to. And it's something we definitely recommend doing is larger pattern pieces, again, should kind of remain around that 20 mark. Medium-sized pieces like sleeves could probably go down to 10 early on when you're just starting to work. And small pieces can go to 5. But right now, if I am looking at this fabric, well, as fun as our fabric 1 or default fabric is, I like to think of this fabric as being our build or our muslin fabric. It's digital muslin. It's not a real fabric, but great for building. Once we have that pattern built, this is where we can start to think about actually going and applying real world fabrics. One thing I forgot. I'm going to go back to my garment rendering style and change this back to front textured surface. There we go. We don't need to see all the crazy spider web mesh. Now, for our fabrics, we're going to need our CLO library. I'm going to, again, we can click on this button in the upper right, or Y on our keyboard is going to open up our library. Make sure you are on the CLO tab and come down to fabrics. So CLO has, I think, over 3, 4, it's a lot of fabrics now. There are quite a lot of different fabrics. One thing I do want to point out is if you see this little white N icon next to any of them, it means that it is just not a downloaded asset yet. So just keep that in mind. You might need to download a material depending on what you choose. And so I'm going to think, all right, well, what do I think my dress is made up of? What do I really want to apply here? I'm going to search by the keywords here. So it's really nice. I have the ability to search through the library because one can imagine scanning through 300 plus fabrics would take a while. And I'm going to type in jersey. Press enter. And I see a lot of different fabrics here that are ready to use. I'm going to use this kind of darker pink V2 cut sew knit jersey. When I click on this fabric, and if I have the italic I for information selected, I can check additional information. So here I see kind of a cut swatch of what the repeat or tiling of this material is going to look like. Construction, it's a jersey. Composition, cotton span, perfect, cotton span poly, that's great. What is the weight, the thickness? It's giving me all sorts of, again, information. Now, it is pink right now, but don't let that worry you. Whatever color the fabric is, that can be adjusted in CLO in a little bit. So don't worry if the only thing you see is bright yellow, excuse me, that can be changed. Now, in order to add this fabric, you may again need to double click or download the item. If it is already downloaded, we can actually go ahead and double click the fabric, and it will then say file has been added to object browser. Perfect. And I can see on the right hand side, V2 cut and sew knit jersey. I love it. Now I'm going to have us add one more material for that, and that is going to be a rib for our neckband. So I'm going to come up to our search bar again where it says jersey. I'm going to change to rib, press enter, and we can see several different jerseys, or several different ribs. For example, if I wanted to download this kind of tan color, I can click the text, this little checkbox in the upper left, and press download. I'm actually going to go ahead and use this orange rib though today. Ooh, maybe actually, you know what? I'm going to use this green. The world is your oyster. You are the designer. You can pick a different one if you like to. And earlier we did a double click to add. What's nice is there are multiple ways to do things in CLO. I can click, drag, and drop this into that area of my object browser, and now I have that fabric there as well. Perfect, easy. I can close my library now that we have both of the fabrics, and I'm ready to start applying them. Now, in order to apply, there's a few different ways we can do it. One, my knit rib is only being applied to one thing right now. I'm only applying it to my neckband. I could click on it, drag it across the screen, and drop onto the material right there, or onto the pattern piece. It is automatically reassigned. But what if I need to apply it to a lot of fabrics at the same time? I don't want to have to drag this pink jersey 10 times. I can actually, while holding shift, and I'm again using my transform pattern tool, make sure to call that out, select my front back bodice, my two pieces of the skirt, and my two sleeves. And we're going to see that there's kind of a new button that's appeared once we have a pattern piece selected. And that is the assign button right here. And this is going to allow us to assign the pattern pieces to this fabric. So I'm going to again click this assign to selected patterns, and all of my pattern pieces are now reassigned. You might have even seen that kind of drape, because I already had simulation running, has changed. Fabric 1, we don't need that fabric 1 anymore. And because it is no longer assigned to anything, there's a little trash can icon, and I can choose to delete fabric 1. I don't need it. Easy peasy. All right. Overall, we have our fabrics. We're going to talk about and improve our colors in a little bit, but actually, you know what? Let's change the colors now. She's looking a little bit like a watermelon. So if we want to adjust our fabric colors in any way, or even maybe do some color blocking in a little bit, I'm going to start with the rib. Zoom in here in 3D and in 2D. Now, in order to change the fabric, we need to click on it in the object browser. So I'm clicking on my knit rib here, and I'm going to come down to the property editor. When we come down here, there is an information section. So name, number, you can customize this if you want. Below is our materials. We have tabs for front, back, and side. So right now, everything will change together, front, back, and side. But if you had double-sided fabrics, you can actually customize them separately. Next, below, type, fabric matte. Now, there are a lot of different fabric types here to choose from. Something important to keep in mind in this material section is it is only the visual of what it looks like. It will not change the physics. So if I said, hey, I want to change this to metal, it now actually has a metallic sheen to the neckband, but I've not changed anything about the physical properties. So do keep that in mind. I'm going to go ahead though, it's a rib. I'm going to change that back to matte. There we go. Now, one other thing just to point out, if you do see something that says in parentheses render only here, It just means that you won't see that reflected in your 3D window. You have to go into the render engine to see that. So just keep that in mind. Now currently, the color is set to white, but this base color map is green. Likely what this means is that when the fabric was scanned, it was actually a green fabric. So I'm like, oh, well, that's no good for me. What's nice is there are these options for desaturate and switch. So I'm going to switch the color, which is going to pull that green color out, which is great. Perfect. It's already turned white for me. Looks much more easy to work with. And now I can click this white color box, and this is going to open up the CLO color picker. Within that, on the left-hand side, we have a hue slider and saturation. We can do RGB, HSV, or CMYK values. There's a little default color palette below here. But also on the right-hand side, there is a Pantone library. Number 1 is the YKK library. And the number 2 is a Colorway color library. So we have these kind of access to all of these different colors in CLO. And maybe I'm thinking I'm going to make this like a black and white dress to like a fun monochromatic. Just going to go with and select black to start. Keep it really nice and easy. Now, as soon as I clicked black, what's really nice is it actually changes the color instantly. I could even start to jump around, maybe try some different colors if I wanted to. It's all in good fun, so we can really quickly and easily do that. In fact, I'm thinking, well, that's just not a very exciting doing black. I actually do want to do black and white. So we'll go monochromatic for now. And then I can click apply and close. And I've changed the color of that fabric from kind of that green to white to black. All right, what if we want to change our other fabric now? I'm going to click on my cut and sew knit jersey, the pink one. Same thing, I'm coming right down to my property editor. Here where it says base color map, I'm going to select switch. Boom, I've pulled it out. I actually now have kind of like a black and white dress, which is really easy to do. Little pop. And now I'm thinking I want to do one last thing. I really want actually her skirt to go back to black. What do we do if we need to add in a copy of an existing fabric? Because it's still going to be made of the same material, just a different color. I'm going to click on my white jersey here. And to the right-hand side, there's a copy icon. Perfect. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to select my new fabric. Now, one thing I do recommend often is if you have copies, it's always good to click on the text box and label it. Otherwise, it just says copy one at the back. I'm going to just write in the word black because I know that this is going to be the black colorway. Perfect. Below here, property editor, I'm going to click on that color chip again. So color, none. Click, select black, apply and close. Now, nothing has actually changed on my garment. I just have added in a new roll of black jersey. No actual changes to my garment yet. If I do want to make any changes to that, I need to assign that fabric to those pattern pieces. So again, with my transform pattern tool, selecting both the front and back pattern pieces while holding shift, I can now go back to my object browser and click that assign to selected patterns. And now I have this kind of fun monochromatic version of the dress that I am looking at. I'm actually also going to change the textured surface so we can see the full thickness of our material if we want. Perfect. So again, I've kind of just made a really fun, quick edit. I've got this cute little monochromatic dress. Oh, I'm feeling it. I'm here for it. It's kind of fun. Let's go ahead and make one or two quick little edits to this dress before we make another color and talk about prints and graphics. Again, what's nice in CLO is it is very easy for us to make edits or changes. Now, by no surprise should it be that we need to switch from transform pattern to edit pattern because we're going to edit our patterns. Now, if we want to go ahead and edit anything, let's say I'm thinking, you know what, I really would like to maybe change the length of her skirt, make it like an inch longer. Why not? I'm going to click on the edge of the front of my skirt or the hem, just the hem. I can actually do both at once, which is really nice. So if I hold shift and select the back as well, since I know I want to change the front and back together, I can select and do both at the exact same time. I can right click directly on that yellow highlighted hemline, and I'm going to choose Offset Pattern Outline. Now, when I choose Offset Pattern Outline, I get a pop-up. Direction, extend. You can also choose to retract, which is nice. If I was making the skirt shorter, I could choose retract. Distance, 1 inch. Now, what's nice is I can actually see that 1 inch and that edit happening in the 2D window at the same time. I'm only offsetting once. Below here, create internal line. Now this would actually leave an internal or red line that is editable later on where the original hem was. What's nice is CLO will actually leave a purple baseline for me instead. It's nice as CLO is giving me some good ways to know how I've edited or changed that. Next here, side segment type is set to perpendicular, which means it's going to continue straight out from that direction. Extend, it might have been a little hard to see. So perpendicular is going to kind of go straight at a kind of a 90-degree angle. Extend will continue in the direction it was already going, or mirror will actually now come inward because the skirt's going out. So my extension would go inward. Now, for this one, I want to keep the extension or that sweep going. So I'm going to choose the extend option. And if we were going around a corner in any way, we would have additional options for our corners, but we're not going around a corner. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to click OK. There's that little purple baseline I was talking about, both in 2D and in 3D, of CLO visually letting me know where was it and where is it now. And if I turn on simulation, it's going to go ahead and just re-simulate that newly extended length of my skirt. One thing to pay attention to is, while it did extend my pattern, CLO did not take that sewing with the extension. But don't worry, it's not like we have to sew the entire side seam back together again. We can take our Edit Sewing tool, again, really nice that kind of things are constantly editable or changeable. I'm going to select, again, with the Edit Sewing, select this sewing line that's sewing the side seam of the skirt together. I'm going to click on the bottom and just drag it till it hits the new hem length. And I'm going to do the same for the back side seam as well. And what's again really nice is we have symmetry. So if I did it to the right side, it also does it to the left side. Easy peasy. And now when I turn on simulation, that is properly sewn together again. Love it. All right, let's do one more add to our dress here. And that is, I really want to add in a little patch pocket to the front of her bodice here. Now, in order to add in a brand new pocket or pattern piece, we have a pattern making tool here. Again, if I click and hold, yours might look like it had a little bite taken out of it. That's okay, because again, it has that little gray triangle. And this is going to be our polygon tool, which has additional options. If we click and hold, polygon, rectangle, ellipse, and spiral. Now in this case, I'm making a pocket, and a rectangle sounds like a pretty good option. So I'm going to select the rectangle option. And in this gray space, just a little to the right of my bodice, I'm going to do a single left click. And we get a precision box here, which is basically CLO being like, hey, how big of a box do you want to make? What kind of size pattern piece? And I'm thinking a 4 by 4 inch pocket sounds pretty good. Nice, simple, easy square. Once again, I could see that change happening in my 2D. I'm going to click OK, and it's instantly going to make that pocket piece. Now we can always reassign it to one of the other fabrics if you don't like the one that CLO had already checked on. But I'm thinking I like to keep this color blocking going, so a black pocket is kind of cute. All right, I have my pocket. I want to make one more change to my pocket before I sew it to my garment. That is to add a little point to the bottom so it'll be like a 5-corner pocket. Or 5-point pocket, I guess some people call it. Now, in order to do that, we can use our edit pattern tool, or we could also use the we could also use the add point / split line tool. Let's go ahead and actually use that one. So now currently you'll notice nothing is highlighted, nothing is selected until I hover over it. Now, as I'm hovering over, I could just left click and add a point and hope I got it in the middle. Actually, that little pink guide that's right there is telling me I am in the middle, which is nice. But precision is key sometimes with CLO, especially with pattern making. So I'm going to go ahead and as my mouse is hovering over this bottom of the pocket, right click. I get a precision box. There are several options, or 3 options to be precise, that we can use to split a line to add a point. Split into 2, so this is if you had uneven amounts. Split by length, or very likely what I would want right now is a uniform split because I want a point to just be right in the middle of that line. And I'm going to click OK. CLO has actually added in a new black segment point right to the bottom of my pocket. And I want to now use my edit pattern tool. I'm going to zoom in for us to see it. I'm going to select this point. And if I start to click and drag, I can move that point around. Now, I definitely want this to go straight down, so I'm going to use Shift. And now as I click and drag, CLO has given me lock guides to bring this straight down. And I could release at any point. So right now, I have my left click and Shift held. What if I want to bring this exactly 1/2 inch down and I'm having trouble getting it to exactly 1/2 inch? We can open up an additional precision box. So I know this is a little confusing, so don't worry. You can repeat as many times as you need to. As I'm left clicking and I'm also holding Shift to go straight down, I'm going to right click at the same time. Now I can release. And this has given me a moving precision box. Distance moved, I'm going to do 0.5 inches. We can see how much that has dropped down. And I can click OK. Perfect. We've got my pocket bag. I love it. I've got a 5-point pocket, easy peasy. Okay, but wait, how do I sew it onto my dress? There's nothing to sew to. This is where we can start to use our internal lines. Now, we could manually draw out this exact same shape. We know all the measurements and amounts we've done. But what's nice is CLO is going to make this a heck of a lot easier. I'm going to marquee over my pocket bag to make sure that the pocket bag is fully selected. And I'm going to right click on those highlighted yellow lines, just one of them. And I'm going to choose this option here, clone as internal shape. So kind of what I talked about a few times, red internal lines. We're going to choose clone as internal shape. We get an outline of our pocket. And now I can place this wherever I want on my garment. So I'm going to place it kind of like about where I think I want it. I'm not quite sure yet. What's nice is we can change it later. And I'm going to single left click to place. And that appears on both sides of my symmetric pattern. But we have something we can actually sew to now. So if we are ready to sew, we've got some lines that we can actually now sew to. I'm going to use my free sewing. And I'm going to sew the pocket to the internals. Now I'm going to start at the upper left-hand corner, click. I'm going to go hover, hover, hover down across the bottom, hover, 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 all the way till I get to the upper right-hand corner and click. Because we don't want to sew the top, nothing worse than a non-functioning pocket. And then go to the upper left-hand side of the internal, and I'm going to follow that exact same path. Starting at the upper left, click. Hover, 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 going down across the bottom to the upper right, and click. Now we actually have our pocket bag sewn to our shirt. And in 3D, this is a great example of how we can use superimpose again. Switching my tool to select / move, right-clicking on my pocket bag, and choosing superimpose over since we want this to be over the top. Perfect. With simulation turned on, we can see we actually have a functioning little pocket bag. I love it. And at the same time, because my pocket bag is selected and because my pocket bag is a very tiny pattern piece, again, we're doing something we've done before. We're changing the simulation properties particle distance from 20 to 5. And that's, again, just going to give us a slightly better overall drape and accuracy to the pocket bag. All right, now what if I'm like, I actually think that's a little bit high on her and kind of want to maybe make some adjustments? Right back to our edit pattern tool. What I like to do is actually double click to fully select those internal lines. I'm just going to click and drag those internal lines down. We can see in 3D how that's moved. And now if I turn simulation on, the pocket bag will just follow the sewing and where it's moved to. So it's really easy to just move an internal line and let that sewing kind of move to that new place. Super easy, super fast, really nice to do. The other thing I do want to show is that, well, I really don't want to see those internal lines on the other side anymore. They're kind of like visually throwing me off a little, and we only want one pocket. If I select the unwanted or unnecessary internal lines, again, I double click to fully select them with my edit pattern tool. Right click, remove linked editing. Now this is not going to remove linked editing from the full pattern piece. It's just going to unlink the internal line. Now you'll notice how if I select one side, the other side isn't glowing anymore. I'm going to double click this pocket bag on the left, hit delete on my keyboard, and there we go. We still have the pocket bag on the right side, but we don't have it on the opposite side anymore. Perfect. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. All right, I love it. Let's go ahead and we're going to add a graphic to our item, and then we're going to make a new secondary colorway. Now, if we want to add in graphics to our garment in any way, again, we have some that we downloaded from our practice folder. Let's go ahead and grab one by, again, opening up our library at the upper right or pressing Y on our keyboard. And we're going to go into our training or CLO Live folder, however you've chosen to name it, for the folder that we downloaded for this entire little practice. And we're going to use this abstract sunset graphic. Now, I'm going to show something that I have 100% done 100 more times than I care to admit, and I want to show you guys something that I've done wrong a lot so you'll know how to fix it in case it ever happens to you. A lot of people, when they're like, great, I have a graphic, I'm going to drag it and I'm going to drop it right onto wherever I want it to go. I'm going to drag it onto the skirt for an example. And you're like, my whole skirt just went transparent and now it has a weird graphic on it, and that was not what I intended to do. I'm going to hit cancel. So CLO just thought that it was basically a tileable repeat on the fabric. And we're like, nope, that's not what it is. We need to tell CLO that it's a graphic. So I'm going to right click here on the PNG of this abstract sunset, and I'm going to choose Add as Graphic. Now, once I choose Add as Graphic, in 2D or in 3D, I can hover over the pattern piece that I want it to be added to. In this case, I'm going to add it to her pocket, and click, left click. Now, once we've added it in, there will be a pocket or a pop-up basically telling you how big the graphic is. Graphics, important to know, are imported at the scale in CLO as whatever they were exported from or however big they actually are. In this case, 5.4 by 5.5. And we can even see its positioning. We can either measure it from the outline or from the center of the graphic. In this case, I'm going to, adjust it after the fact. So I'm like, okay, perfect. I'm going to go ahead and close my library. And what I can see here is that sunset graphic is a little bit too big for my pocket bag. But in CLO, we can always edit it. We can change the scale. Now, since we did just right click and we told CLO to add it as a graphic, CLO has switched us in our object browser to our graphics tab, where we can see our little abstract sunset graphic. And also it has changed us to our transform graphics tool on our 2D toolbar and also on our 3D toolbar. Because guess what? We can move it around in either window. I can move my graphic in 3D by left clicking and just dragging it around. Same, I can do it in my 2D window. Either option, whichever way you prefer to work. Now, what I do want to do is definitely make this graphic a little smaller. When I select the graphic, you will see this little bounding circle around it, and at those different 45-degree angles, I can have a scale, little kind of like diagonal arrow. And if I click and hold, I can make this smaller. Now, same thing earlier when we were kind of dragging that pocket point around. If I left click and hold, at the same time in 2D, I can right click and get a precision box again, which isn't that kind of nifty. So if I knew the exact size or percentage I wanted to shrink it to, I could do that right here. So I'm going to shift it to 75% of the original size and click OK. And I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of pleased that I got that so nice and center. And overall, I'm pretty happy with it. Maybe just want to drag it a little bit more downward so it's not so close to the edge. But there we go. I've added in my abstract sunset graphic. I feel like it should still be a little smaller. I'm just going to make it a little smaller. There we go. I'm more happy with that. And we've put this onto our garment here, which is really, really nice. We could even go into the object browser, abstract sunset graphic, and under our print type, there are different types of print types. So maybe you have a crack or a vintage distress look that you want to apply to it. What I really like is it's going to be a solid kind of print. I'm just going to blend it with the base fabric, which means that like the texture of the base fabric is going to come through on the graphic in 3D. And type again. Maybe I want to make it a metallic finish, a velvet finish. Maybe it has a little shine to it. I could give it that different type of shine, which is really nice. So again, there are lots of different options in CLO, and there are lots more tutorials on our YouTube that will dig even further into these different things. Again, today's a little bit of a really broad overview of CLO. So it's really nice, again, that you can use these different options or even change the color. I'm going to leave it as white for now, but it's kind of fun. You can change the color of it. All right, now that I have one graphic, I want to add in one more graphic, and that is going to be a tag. You know, no garment is complete without a final touch of a tag. Again, opening up my CLO library using the button or Y on our keyboard, and right here I have CLO tag. With that CLO tag, let's do a different way of how we can apply it. So earlier we did a right click, add as graphic. This time I'm just going to drag it and drop it right into my graphic object browser. Perfect. It's there. It's ready to go for me to use. I want this to be at the center back of our bodice under the neckline. So I'm going to take my CLO tag and drag and drop it about where I want it in 2D onto a pattern piece. And the first thing I notice is, well, I really don't want to be able to see that on the outside. That wasn't really what I was going for, was it? But it is nice that when you do add this to the graphics tab, CLO knows it's a graphic. So when you drag and drop it, it will apply correctly and not tile across an entire pattern piece. Now, if we want this to be on the inside of our garment and not the outside, I'm going to select my graphic, come over to the graphics property editor, and where it says face, I'm going to change it from front to back. Now, it's going to completely disappear in 2D and 3D. You're like, uh-oh, where did it go? But if we look at our avatar here, we come to our avatar display. Earlier, we had used this to turn on and off our arrangement points. But in this case, we're going to turn off our avatar. She's still there, but we can see the tag on the inside of our garment, which I think is pretty nifty. Perfect. I'm going to bring my avatar back. There we go. All right, now for our final thing before we start talking about presentation, let's go ahead and actually add in a second colorway, maybe with a print. I mean, I love my monochromatic look, but I kind of also want like a blue striped nautical kind of theme. Now, in order to open up our colorway windows, we can come to the top of the window where it says Production and select Colorway. Right here, it's going to add in our current colorway. Now, if for some reason, maybe your thumbnail here isn't showing your avatar in any way, what we can do is realign your garment in the 3D window. Again, rotate around, pan as needed, and then click this update icon in the upper left-hand corner of the colorway window, and CLO will just take a new snapshot. So Nice, quick, easy workaround. Below, I'm going to name my default colorway. Mono. I spelled that wrong, but that's okay. All right, now that we have this, below we can actually see all the colors that are currently applied. So there's black and white basically. We can see the fabrics that are applied. We can also see the graphics that are applied. Now, if we had more things applied, we would see those. If we had zippers, if we had top stitches, if we had puckering added, buttons, buttonholes, we would see all of that below. It will all exist and be editable in the colorway version. Instead, though, for now, we're going to just add in a new colorway. Now, in order to add another colorway, we want to click this add icon. We do not want to click add as custom. That is very much so a more advanced feature. In fact, our wonderful UX designer Phoebe has a great tutorial on that if you do need it on the YouTube. For now, we're just going to click add, and Chloe is going to literally copy our existing colorway. Perfect. I'm going to, again, relabel this. I always like to label my colorway. So if you had a style name, a number, something like that, I'm just going to label this blue stripe because I know what I'm making. And coming here now to our different fabrics, the first fabric I want to replace is going to be the main white bodice fabric. So I can click on that knit jersey here, or I can also click on it here under our object browser to open up the full property editor for it. Time to apply a print. If we want to apply any type of print, I'm going to go right into my library again, press Y on the keyboard or open it with the button in the upper right corner. And here I have a blue and white stripe PNG. Really nice and simple. The key here when you're adding in a graphic in CLO is make sure it is in a clean repeat. That'll make your life a heck of a lot easier. I'm going to take this PNG graphic, I'm going to drag it, and where it says base color map, I'm going to drop it onto that. And I'm going to close my library. Now, in my 3D window, there's a stripe. Great, we did it. In my Colorway Editor, we got to hit update again. Just keep that in mind. If you make major updates, you will need to edit or click update to see that reflected in the Colorway tab. Okay, well, I've got that, but I'm not necessarily loving the black skirt now and the black rib. Definitely want to change that too. But of course, we can continue to work down our different colors, either again in the Colorway Editor or selecting this. Now, one nice thing, I want to change both the rib and the jersey that my skirt and pocket are made up of. Instead of clicking on these fabrics or the fabrics in my object browser, nice little tip, I can select the black color up here. The black color chip will actually select everything below that's using that black color. And now in the property editor, here, color, where it says black, I'm going to click on that black color chip and open up my colorway picker. I could go with some sort of crazy, maybe a bright pink, a little peachy for me. We could go through our Pantones. Another option we have, and it's fun to use, is the eyedropper. And the eyedropper can select outside of the color box. And in fact, you can actually select things outside of CLO, which is kind of crazy. And you could actually pick a new color. I'm going to hit escape to exit the eyedropper, and I've just added in a new color chip here. So if I've added in that color and applied it, maybe I also want to make sure I can use it again, just in case. I can click Add to Custom Palette below, and it's added in that blue color. So a really nice thing, we can use that eyedropper. Maybe if we need to match a color to something that's in a print or in a graphic, we can actually use that. Hit Apply and Close again. Give CLO a second to think. Perfect. And there we go. I'm going to hit Update. And now we have a black and white version. We also have a blue and a blue-white striped version, which I think is pretty nifty. And one thing I still do want to adjust with my print here is the scale. Now, I'm in my Colorway Editor. If we notice at the bottom of our window, there's two tabs now. So I'm going to go back to my 2D pattern window. Makes it a little easier to adjust. And I'm going to select this new tool, Edit Texture, parentheses 2D. When I select this, I can actually now click on my graphic, or sorry, I can click on my fabric or pattern piece that has a print. This is also where we can adjust grain lines. So everything currently is cut really nice on the grain. But if I wanted to, I could actually rotate my grain line. Let's look at the back there. So I could even, change. Maybe I want this to be cut on the bias or something. I'm going to undo because I want to keep it on the straight grain. But it is really nice you can do that. Or if you click in the middle of the grain line, we can actually change the placement. Now in a stripe, I'm not too worried, but if you had a really advanced kind of striped or a balanced print that needs to be used or an engineered print, you can adjust things like that, which is really nice. But here at the upper right-hand corner, we have a little scale window. And this only adjusts the print. So it'll adjust the rotation of how the print is printed on the fabric, or it's going to adjust the scale of how it's printed. In this case, this middle toggle, I can increase and decrease the size. So if I want to make my stripe a little smaller, I can bring it inward, and I now have a skinnier stripe, which I actually think looks quite a bit better. So you know what? I'm good. I like that. I'm here for this kind of stripe. And overall, I'm pretty happy with the different colorways that I've just made. Now, I'm kind of ready to get something out of CLO, something I could show my friends, show on social media, tag CLO in it if you do. Maybe it's for work and you needed to show a coworker. There's a quick, easy way to get things out of CLO called Snapshot. Now, for our snapshot though, maybe we want to make sure everything is ready before we get out our snapshot. Now, our avatar in A pose is completely fine. Maybe we just want something really quick and simple. We can do that. Or if we wanted her to be in a bit more of a relaxed pose, we can do that too. And that's where our pose folder that we talked about earlier with our avatars comes from. So opening up our CLO library or pressing Y, going to our CLO default folder, coming to our avatars. Now we have a female mannequin, so we do want to go into the female pose or female folder, pose, and there are several different poses to choose from. You are welcome to choose any one you like. Now, also what's very nice is at the Connect store, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of poses available, many of them for free. So also recommend checking that out in the future. But for today, I'm going to go with this female V2 standing O1 pose. Looks pretty nice and simple. Click. Now, once I double click, I get a pop-up. I'm only changing the pose, so I'm going to select that and click OK. And what I think is always fun is the avatar quite literally just adjusted her pose to the pose I assigned it to really quickly. I'm pretty happy with how that looks, and she looks a little bit more relaxed, a little more presentable, not so stiff in A pose. One last thing I do want to do here is go into high res. And maybe you're thinking, well, why didn't we go into high res first? And that was because, again, we made a big adjustment when the avatar animated from one pose to another. So we're like, let's stay in low res while we're reposing. And now let's go into high res. Now, we could go into each pattern piece and change the particle distance. Or, of course, our CLO dev team thought of this. There is a high-res garment button. Looks like a half a t-shirt with an upwards pointed arrow. And when we click on high res, we get a pop-up, and now we can put in all of our own settings. Now, the default settings are really actually what we want, which is nice. The particle distance is going to change to 5. The tolerance is just letting us know that the pattern pieces have to be between 5 and 20, which we know that they are. The collision is going to be reduced. So collision, we want to think of that as like a force field, like a Star Trek style force field around our pattern pieces that are going to protect the avatar and the garments from themselves. Same with skin offset. This is again collision or a force field around our avatar. And we're going to see that right before I turn on simulation. I'm going to show you guys what that does. And finally, simulation quality. I'm going to leave it at normal today, but if you were going to go into actually fitting a garment, you would want to go into fitting accurate. Today, normal is okay. We're just getting an image. I'm going to click OK. Now, right off the bat, nothing really seems to happen, although CLO is taking a few seconds to recalculate the new mesh, that kind of spider web. And I did want to show this. If I zoom into our avatar's neck here, we can kind of see this gap between the avatar and the actual neckline of the garment. It's almost like the garment is ever so slightly hovering off of her. That is the collision, and we just removed that. So now, when I go in and press spacebar to turn on simulation, do you notice how that garment sort of just kind of dropped onto her shoulders? Because it actually is now able to sit closer to the body because we are in high res. Again, things might move a little slower now, but we are a heck of a lot more accurate. So we have all of those things turned on. Let's get to that snapshot. In order to open the snapshot, we can go up to File in the upper left-hand corner, Snapshot, 3D window. Now, the first thing CLO is going to ask is, where do you want to save this snapshot? Now, as a big tip, I would recommend on your computer's desktop, make a folder, label it Renders. So if I go back to my desktop, I will see that there is literally a folder labeled Renders. I'm going to select that folder once you've made it, and I would click Open. And this is going to basically let CLO, this is going to tell CLO that in future all your kind of snapshots, and even we're going to set up your renders to go to this one folder. It's way easier to make sure your renders and snapshots always go to one place than having to worry about where in the world they might end up deep in the CLO kind of file structure, which can be a little more difficult to get to. But also it just means once you set it up once, you can kind of leave it alone. Set it and forget it. And we can also put in our file name. Now, what do I want to label this? I'm going to go with CLO Simple Dress. Again, we can name it whatever we like. And option type PNG. I always prefer to use a PNG over a JPEG. Hit save. And now we have the actual snapshot button pop up. For this, we have two options, single or multi-view. I'm going to do a multi-view. You know, it's always nice to get a couple of different views of our garment. And CLO is even giving us two little previews, but we can change that. So let's talk about our single image size. There are presets here. I definitely recommend within presets to use the pixel options. But again, you as the designer or whatever output you need, you can choose. I'm going to go with this 1920. Let's go for something in the middle, just in case if computers run a little slow. I'll do 1280 by 720. Orientation, portrait or landscape. Here is the width. So if I needed to customize it, I could. And resolution. I'm going to increase this resolution to 300, giving it a bit, again, a bit more of a high quality resolution or output. On the right side for our layout, view count, anything from 2 to 10. I'm going to do 4. 4 seems like a good number. You can see instantly above, CLO added 2 more kind of quick snapshots. The layout, I have it set as horizontal across the screen. Colorways, this is kind of really nice. We can do all current colorway, which will be just my blue and white stripe version. All, which will be also my monochromatic, or custom. And this is if we have 10 different colorways in a file, we could choose the specific ones we wanted. Maybe a few colorways got dropped along the way. I'm just going to do current for now though. Options, I also like to have transparent background set up. Now, once we have these options, we can come up here and set up what are the actual output images going to look like. In this case, my front. And if I come to the top, there's a little drop-down menu, so I can choose some of these different options if I want. Or one of my favorite things is I can actually come in here, zoom in on my little 3D window, and at the lower left-hand corner of this image, hit the camera button, and CLO will take a custom snapshot. So I could maybe make a little side angle, kind of come up from above. There we go. Make another snapshot. No, don't like that. Let's go there. Definitely need like a back view of her because I don't really need the full avatar. I don't need her legs or anything. And then finally, maybe a close up with my cute little graphic. So we'll zoom into the graphic and take an additional snapshot. So you can take kind of as many as you want and kind of readjust the angle. Now, before I click save at the bottom right, I notice here I can see that purple baseline on the hem of my skirt and that red outline of my pocket. Now, something important is whatever visuals are turned on in your 3D window are going to be part of your output of the snapshots. If I don't want to see those red lines, I can come to my garment display. So here it looks like a tiny t-shirt, third option down. And I can turn on and off all of these other options. So show garment, definitely want to see my garment. Archive patterns, I don't have any archive patterns, but I probably wouldn't want to see them. Seam lines, if we wanted to see or not see where things are sewn together, we probably want to see those. Show internal lines, I'm going to check that off, and you'll notice that that red outline around the pocket bag is gone. Show baseline, I'm going to check that off as well. And now you'll see that there's no kind of purple baseline around the hem of her skirt. And I could go through and turn on and off the rest of these, although these ones, there's nothing there to see anyway, so I'm pretty good, I think. If you didn't even want the avatar in your snapshots, you could actually hide the avatar and it would just be a floating garment. I mean, the world's your oyster. You can choose all of these different things. So really, it is important to just, check your vertical toggle settings to turn on and off what you may or may not need. And from there, click Save. And CLO is going to actually go ahead and it's going to toggle through all of those different options to get you what you want. And once it's done, you'll actually see all of those appear in your folder. All right, and so now what I see if I open this up is these 4 different images of my kind of close-ups that I just took of my dress. So it's really nice, and this is very fast and very easy to get all of these images out all at once. Now, what if we want to do something a little more elaborate with a fancy render? Now, one thing I will say is there are tutorials that will go much deeper into the CLO render engine, but if we want to just start by opening it up today, which is great, at the top of our screen, we're going to go to Render. So Render. All right, so once we are in the render engine, over here on our right-hand side, you might either see just a completely gray space or kind of like a brightly lit space like mine. And what we need to do is it says click here to activate interactive render. You can either click in the gray space in the middle of the screen, or on the upper right-hand corner in the rendering toolbar, we can click on interactive render here. And this is actually going to turn on our interactive render, and we're going to see reflected what we see in our 3D screen in our rendering screen. And now we can go through and actually start setting up all of the different options we want of what kind of image, high quality image do we want to output from CLO. So to start here, we're going to go into our render properties. What's nice is a lot of this like this, we set it up once and we're kind of good for the future. Engine. Now here for PCs and for Macs, if you have a newer Mac, you will have the options for CPU or GPU CUDA. I do recommend using GPU CUDA with CPU supporting. Below here, we have finish conditions. And the first thing is noise thresholds. If we think about this, this is kind of like that fuzz you might see in a photo. Now, a lot of the settings are going to be very dependent on how powerful your computer is. My recommended amount is usually 0.030 for this. You can always keep it at the default, again, depending on your computer. Maximum render time. Now, this doesn't mean that this image is going to take 20 minutes. It just means I'm giving CLO up to 20 minutes to complete the image. This image will likely take my computer about a minute. Beyond that, you might need to increase this if you are doing things like using render-only materials like fur. That's when you might need to actually increase the time. Global map, I'm going to leave that at the default. Quality. This is really about the light in your scene and how it bounces. If you need an image pretty quick, I would leave it at medium. But again, if you are doing something really presentation heavy and a lot of people are going to be looking at it, maybe zooming into it, increasing it to high or very high is a good option. I like to usually just go with high. I don't think that very often people see massive amounts of differences from high to very high. Beyond here, below mesh optimization, we're not using the knitwear today, so we don't need to worry about that. Color mapping, we're going to leave at the default Reinhardt, and image filter. This kind of adds in a filter to prevent some of that moire effect. You might even see a little bit of it happening here on her shirt. So you could increase that amount of filter depending on what you're looking at for that image. Next, we're going to go into our light settings. Now, there are some absolutely amazing lighting tutorials on our YouTube that dig really deep into CLO lights. For today, we're going to just use a preset, which is really nice. Again, if you've got presets, why not use them? In our presets, we're going to see a lot of different options here. I'm going to use this Studio High Contrast, gives me some really nice deep shadows and stuff. You should also see a little pop-up of a preview. For some reason, it's popping up on my other monitor, but it is there to use. And as soon as you select a different light, you're going to see that light change if you have interactive render turned on. Beyond lighting, we have camera properties next. Now, for this, the only thing I often will change is the field of view. I will increase it from the default of 15 to 35, giving me a bit more depth and a wider camera angle. Again, very up to you. There is also, what's fun is camera properties are render only. And these physical camera properties are kind of like aperture speed and things that a real camera would have. Fun to mess around with, again, if you are really familiar with real life photography. Beyond that, finally, we are going to look at image/video properties. And this is all the settings for the output of the final actual image. Yay! All right, so here, image/video in the property editor. Again, I am on this button here. I feel like I didn't highlight it, image/video. We're going to be doing an image, but in future you could do a turntable, which is really good for putting up on a TV for a presentation or even animation. Beyond that, we have viewpoint. We can do a current view or a custom view. So current view will render out whatever closed camera sees in this moment. That's what we get. If we do custom view, we're going to get a little pop-up in the upper right. Oh, I already had some set up in here. But what's nice is I could come in, maybe I want to get a better close-up of the dress for my final image, and I would click, and now I have a brand new custom view added in here. What's nice is custom views also let you jump around to different perspectives really quickly. I'm going to use just this custom view. And because I don't want to render out all of my custom views, I'm going to change it back to current view, and I'm just going to use this one viewpoint. Colorway. This is where if we wanted to render out one colorway, whatever we currently see, or multiple colorways, if I wanted to do my monochromatic look as well, I could do that, which is really nice. I'm going to just stick with my current one. Below here, image size. So what is CLO outputting? How big is that image? 1920 by 1080 is a really good sized image. But again, if you have a certain size that you need to output, you can put that below by customizing it. Background. Now for background, we could put in a fun color by clicking that white color chip. It's going to open up the CLO color picker. Put in a kind of a matching blue, maybe a pop of color, maybe a bright yellow. We could do any type of color if we wanted to and hit apply and close. You can even add in textures or vignettes. You could add in a photo to the background if you wanted, or a vignette, which kind of is this gray shadowing effect. CLO actually has a lot of these that come with CLO, so I could choose a random gradation, and I'll just kind of add in so the background looks a little less flat, has a little more depth. But if you, let's say we're putting this onto a slideshow, something that was going to be printed out, and you're like, I don't, or maybe a line plan. You're like, I don't want any of these types of colors. You could do transparency. I see currently something important is transparency will only be an option if below you have PNG selected. Transparency is not an option with JPEG images. So now my transparency is checked on. That background actually disappears, and I'll have a transparent background, which is totally fine. From here, file name, we can choose custom or project name. So if I have, currently my project is CLO Live Test Dress. Great, that is the file name of my final rendered image. You can of course do custom. And next here, file path. This is where we're telling CLO where is this image going to actually be saved. I'm going to click this little folder. This is where I actually already have mine set up. So earlier, if you remember when we did our snapshot, we kind of made a folder on our desktop called renders. Again, here, I can go back to my desktop. I would select that renders folder just so it is highlighted. and choose Select Folder. I believe on a Mac it will say Open. And now future renders, and as well as this one, will all go to that Renders option. And lastly, again, what I just changed, PNG or JPEG. I selected PNG. So as long as I have an angle on my camera that I've selected, I've set up my lights, I've set up my camera, I'm ready to go. Lights, camera, action. What we do need to do is we will click Stop Render. This is going to stop our interactive render. You'll notice that if I change my camera view here and rotate, it's not rotating in the render window anymore. And finally, we click Play. So once you click play, you're going to see a little kind of timer and bar appear at the lower right. Again, how fast this goes is very much so going to be dependent on how fast your actual computer is. This can take anywhere from a few seconds to several minutes. And again, also very much so dependent on how complex the garment you have in the window is. What's nice is image/video has been saved. Mine only took 14 seconds. That's amazing. I have a very new computer. And I can click Open the folder. CLO is going to open that folder where all of my renders live. And right here, it opened in my other window, is my final beautiful render that we've done. And guys, that is kind of everything CLO quick start guide to get you started in CLO pretty quick. Again, there are tons of other tutorials on our YouTube. There is CLO Academy. Beyond that, we also, again, there is a forum on CLO Connect. So we have a community forum. We also have the official CLO Discord where you can come to ask questions. Myself, as well as several other moderators, are there every day to help you guys learn and do all things CLO. I really hope everybody enjoyed this. We're hoping to do these more often. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next workflow tutorial. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you later.